Hello dear learners, I hope that you are finding the modules of this MOOC interesting and informative and that you all are enjoying the modules. In the previous module, we had discussed language and literary skills. Here in this module, we shall try to understand the meaning of ESP and why the English language has become the lingua franca in the professional workplaces of the 21st century and what types of language skills we should always try to develop in us for the purpose of a particular profession. So, let us begin this module with a discussion on the meaning of the term ESP. In general terms, English for specific purposes can be defined as an approach to language teaching that targets the current and future academic or occupational needs of the learners. It also focuses on the necessary language and skills to address those needs and also assists them in meeting these needs through the use of the general and discipline-specific teaching materials and methods. For example, learners like you are maybe from various fields and backgrounds, and your language learning needs may differ from each other. Some of you may be still studying at the graduate and postgraduate levels, or some of you might be already working in areas like business, media, marketing, finance, and so on. So, don't you think that your academic needs will differ from occupational or professional needs? English for specific purposes is one of the most established teaching approaches that caters to your professional needs. So, ESP is the term that has traditionally been used for courses which aim at teaching English language required for specific situations, mainly in terms of occupational contexts. So many authors have defined the term ESP. Let's take the case of Anne Jones and Dudley Evans, who defined ESP in terms of absolute and variable characteristics. So we shall now look at the characteristics of ESP. The absolute characteristics of ESP include the following. ESP is defined to meet specific needs of the learners. ESP makes use of the underlying methodology and activities of the discipline or area it serves. ESP is centered on the language appropriate to these activities in terms of grammar, lexis, register, study skills, discourse, and so on. Now, if we look at the variable characteristics of ESP, they will include the following. ESP may be related to or designed for specific disciplines. ESP may use in specific teaching situations a different methodology from that of general English. ESP is likely to be designed for adult learners, either at the tertiary level institution or in a professional work situation. ESP is generally designed for intermediate or advanced learners. And most ESP courses assume some basic knowledge of the language system. However, in this module, we shall not look at the underlying methodology or grammar, lexis, register, study skills related to ESP learning. Rather, we shall try to see that ESP is aimed at providing language support to learners so that they can successfully address their specific academic or occupational needs. Therefore, we shall in this module focus more on the language skills that are required as part of ESP. What exactly are the specific academic or occupational needs, or what exactly do we understand by the terms specific academic needs or occupational needs? Now, imagine you are a doctor. What are some of the things a doctor does that might require language knowledge or skills? In their profession, doctors from all over the world use English as part of their study on a new medicine, or maybe while meeting patients, writing prescriptions, or attending conferences to present their works. Or imagine that you are a lawyer. What are some of the things a lawyer has to do as part of his or her profession? ESP is all about offering language support to the people in various professions so that they can successfully accomplish the tasks with the help of language components. We shall also try to understand that not all language needs are ESP needs. For example, learning the top 100 most frequent words of English or speaking with a good pronunciation and intonation may not be part of ESP needs. In order to write a good paragraph or essay, we probably need to learn the use of the tenses, grammar, and syntax. When a teacher explains us the use of tenses because it might help us in future while speaking and writing in English, we are in fact learning general English skills rather than ESP skills. But while stepping into the outside world, we might have some ESP needs in a workplace setting, such as a factory, a restaurant, or hospital. In the manufacturing industry, for example, many companies organize special intensive ESP courses to assist their staff improve communication and presentation skills. For instance, in the aviation industry, pilots receive specialized language training so that they can communicate effectively with flight control office, avoiding communication errors that could even lead to flight crash. We can also find ESP courses offered as part of vocational training, as in case of a country like India, where workers at the call centers are guided on how to respond appropriately to confused or angry customers. Various educational institutions across the world offer ESP courses so that their graduates can enter the world of work without any difficulty. You will probably find it interesting to note that in the Japanese universities, ESP courses are offered to help science students to learn how to listen to, understand content lectures given in English through a process of note-taking and discussion. In the universities of the United States of America, there are numerous ESP courses offered to overseas students to help them with their academic writing. So, of late, around the world, there can be seen an increasing demand for ESP courses which are intended to help non-native speakers of English to improve their communication skills. Dear friends, ESP addresses many different facets of the communication process that are needed to achieve a particular goal, and here a working knowledge of functional English specific to a profession become very useful. So, after we have discussed the meaning of ESP and the need of ESP, let us now discuss the growth of the English language as a worldwide lingua franca. We have already stated the importance of English in the very first module of this course. English is spoken by around 400 million native speakers. English is by far the most used language by non-native speakers. Let us quickly look at the factors behind the popularity of English as the language of communication across the world. One of the main reasons why English has developed into a global lingua franca is due to its strong connection with growth in trade and commerce. The link between English and the business world can be traced back to the 16th century. The link between English and the business further flourished in the 1940s following the World War II. Many countries involved in the war got destroyed economically except the countries like USA, Canada, and the UK. Consequently, these countries became central to the rebuilding effort and business opportunities began to emerge, including the export of technology and technical expertise to parts of Europe, Africa, and Asia. New technical manuals and reports began to be published extensively in English to support this new exportation of goods and services. Then another factor is, around the same time, research journals began to publish important findings in English, conditioned by the growing need for research to be disseminated to the largest possible audience in a language understood by all. Another factor that led to English becoming a dominant language was the growth of the computer industry, mostly in the USA. These developments led to the creation of new programming languages based on English, new communication standards written in English, and the use of English as the primary language for radio communications, aviation, and later the internet. It is currently estimated that nearly 80% of the world's information is stored in the English language, and that the world's largest computer firms like Microsoft, Apple, IBM, Intel, and Google are based in English-speaking countries. So, from these factors, you must have understood that English has had a central role in all these developments, and companies are now increasingly demanding that their workforce can understand this global lingua franca and use the English language without any difficulty. As a result of all this, there is a strong need for language instructors who can understand and implement ESP programs in the industries as well as the companies. Now, let us quickly look at the growth of English in the industries across the globe. To understand the importance of English in the industries, we may look at the policies of some of the major companies in non-English speaking countries, namely Japan, Korea, and China. In Japan, the famous Japanese car manufacturing company Nissan had been using English as its official company language since 1999. Before that, Nissan almost went bankrupt, and so to strengthen the company after its collapse, they quickly introduced a radical English-only policy, and the company's profit was dramatic. The trend to recruit global talent has been accelerating rapidly also in Korea and China. Samsung, the largest electronic manufacturer in Korea, encourages non-Korean graduates to apply for positions by stating that English is the only required language needed to work in the company. Similarly, two of the biggest companies in China, Haier and China National Petroleum Corporation, recruit foreign workers with the knowledge and skills of communication through the English language. Not only are Asian companies recruiting more and more English-speaking workers, they are also increasing sending their workers overseas to work in subsidiary companies where wages and product manufacturing costs will be lower. Two prime locations for such a subsidiary company are India and Vietnam. Of course, local workers in India and Vietnam cannot be expected to know Japanese, Chinese, or Korean. As a result, English has become the lingua franca of the workplaces. Increasingly, many Japanese, Chinese, and Korean employers are reluctant to work overseas due to their serious lack of confidence in the use of English. Therefore, the Asian companies are willing to pay high wages to the ESP experts to train their workers before they depart to these foreign destinations. Dear friends, if we look at the situation in Europe, it is even more complicated. For example, the European Union operates using 24 official languages, with English, French, and German serving as the core languages. In reality, however, much business is conducted only in English, especially when it involves non-European clients. Perhaps the best example of an industry in which English plays a central role is the call center industry in India, which has grown at a phenomenal rate since the early 2020s. As a result of cheaper internet telephony systems, improved wireless networks, and a greater desire by the companies in the West to outsource their services, call center workers often receive some of the highest wages in the country, provided they have good enough English skills to respond appropriately to the callers routed towards them through places like the UK and the USA. The need to train the call center workers has also led to a new industry of ESP training centers in India. Another important example of an industry where the English language plays a determining role is the tourism industry. Today, even the non-English speaking countries have seen steady rise in the number of English speaking tourists due to cheaper air tickets and the abundance of English-based information about the destination sites through the internet. This is particularly relevant in the Southeast Asian countries like Japan, Korea, and China. In response to these changes, many countries have seen rapid growth in the number of new ESP courses in tourism and hospitality. These are appearing in both vocational schools and universities, and they aim to train would-be tourist guides, hotel staff, and other people connected with the industry. Dear learners, we have to see what ESP is and what ESP is not. ESP does not aim at improving learners' English proficiency indiscriminately. Instead, they are acknowledged as important stakeholders who have decided to study the English language for a particular purpose. After the purposes are mapped, the teacher can help them reach their goals. ESP will allow the learners to use English to fulfill their needs. For example, reading a manual, writing a dissertation, listening to a lecture, presenting a report, and so on. For example, there is no point teaching a bus driver writing skills as part of the ESP course. For such people, the skills of listening and speaking are probably the most important ones, since they will have to constantly interact with the passengers, colleagues at the control office, or even the police officers, asking them for directions if they come across road diversions, etc. So, an ESP training cannot be predetermined in a social and educational vacuum. They will have to be prepared in response to specific and contextual factors. The texts to be used in an ESP course are likely to differ widely. For instance, ESP writing courses vary depending on the target learners. Accountants in different parts of the world might need to study financial reports. Journalists will need to learn about news stories, and lexicographers perhaps should specialize in the writing of dictionary entries. Finally, the text materials to be used in ESP should relate to the tasks that the learners will have to undertake in their daily routines. ESP, as you have understood by now, is different from general English, which is aimed at a very wide range of learners. However, both a lawyer and a marketing executive might benefit from attending the same business English course, focusing on the generic skills they both need at the workplace, such as writing an email or participating in the meeting, etc. But they might also get some more attending an ESP course in legal or marketing English, respectively. They will get an opportunity to focus more precisely on the professional needs. Therefore, ESP courses can be created for working professionals. For example, a teacher providing in-company lessons in a law firm. Dear friends, modern workplace communication expects well-rounded professionals who do not only have an excellent command over their subject area, but who can also communicate well both with their colleagues and the general public. The focus needs to be on communication, but they should consider both accuracy and fluency. This ability to go beyond the subject specialism and to be able to communicate well in professional context is called soft skills. The specific purposes in ESP are generally related to either one's profession or one's academic studies. However, there is a marked difference between English for general purpose and English for specific purpose. Let us quickly look at this diagram. When you think in terms of the topic of English for generic purpose or EZP, it is most commonly general life. It's most commonly related to general life, whereas the topic for ESP is specific to the occupation. For example, financial industry. If we look at the skill of EZP, it mainly focuses on all the four skills, that is speaking, writing, reading, and listening. But the skill related to ESP is more selective emphasis, whereas the skills necessary for ESP, it is always selectively emphasizing in one of those four skills. If we look at the texts available in an EZP course, then we will find that the texts in EZP are interactive, social, and informal. For example, discussions, telephone conversations, introductions, arguments, etc. Whereas in an ESP course, the texts are rather informative. For example, as it is available in financial industry developments, or transactional. For example, arrangements in the business, or it may be formal. For example, it may be professional and customer related. If we look at the language content in EZP, we are talking about the general knowledge of English. For example, the parts of speech or the use of tenses. Whereas if we consider the language contents in ESP, it deals with the key aspects needed for the target profession. For example, words related to banking products or services. When we think about the activities in the EZP course, we generally resort to activities like games and anecdotes, songs, etc. Whereas the activities particular to a ESP course is mostly related to role playing in a professional setting. Once we have seen the difference between English for generic purpose and English for ESP purpose, let us quickly look at ESP and the language skills that are required. So as you progress with the modules of this MOOC, and if you are engaged in a workplace or are planning to join a profession, try to sort out which of the following skills, reading, writing, listening, and speaking, would you prioritize as part of your purpose of learning the English language. You may either choose a profession that you like most. In whatever profession you are currently in, the following points will help you a lot. Always try to find out which or what type of tasks in your profession shall be performed in English. Secondly, what type of skills out of the reading, listening, speaking, and writing skills should be required to perform each task. Then, thirdly, what lexical or grammatical items will have to be used when performing that particular task. Next, what skills are valued most in that profession? What skills are needed to perform your job successfully? What language, vocabulary, or grammar will you need to fulfill your tasks in English? Then you may also look at which content in the USP material shall be most valuable for you, or what language features can be deemed to be most important and relevant in specialized communicative situations. So, different professionals will have different language needs as a result of the tasks they perform. But their training needs are also conditioned by their objectives and the level of knowledge of specialized professional language. For example, we may think about the need of vocabulary, which depends on the ESP learner's profiles and background. For example, age, nationality, professional experience, proficiency level, educational background, etc., or the professional knowledge that they already have, and so on. So, dear friends, we come to the end of this module. In this module, we have discussed the meaning and characteristics of ESP, the growth of English as the world lingua franca and as the language of industries across the world, what ESP is and what it is not, as well as the language skills that we shall have to keep in our minds while dealing with a particular situation in a profession. Hence, while discussing the need for training on ESP, a thorough and systematic needs analysis is the prerequisite. We shall have to understand what ESP actually represents, how we could actually benefit from pursuing an ESP course that suits our profession, and what type of language skills are required as part of that ESP. See you again in the next module. Till then, bye.